Mess ups are totally okay, guys. We're going for mess ups. We're gonna hope that this works. We also hope that, yeah. Okay. Hi there. You're watching Rose Squad Reviews. I'm Melanie, and I don't usually talk about video games as a somewhat disjointed lead-in into my topic here. I don't play them a whole lot. I wouldn't consider myself an avid gamer. I do enjoy them. There's a couple series that I really get into, and some that I feel like I have a little bit more grounds to talk on. I just finished Professor Layton and the Last Specter as a replay going through because I really like the series and I'm like, you know what, I want to experience this again. And there's just some things I need to talk about, so we're just gonna rant here. Don't get me wrong, I love the Professor Layton series. I think it's a really great series with lots of fun content. Storylines are usually pretty solid. The puzzles are interesting, they kind of get you thinking. One of my favorite things about them is they don't involve a whole lot of button mashing because I like to be able to think about my decisions. That's not really adult and mature, but it's more like boss fights intimidate me. Professor Layton is sort of set up like Star Wars in that the first 3 games come after the second set of 3 games in like the chronological timeline. So obviously you have Professor Layton the Curious Village, Professor Layton and the Diabolical Box, and then Professor Layton and the Unwanted Future for the first 3, and the second 3 being Professor Layton and the Last Specter, which we're going to talk about today, Professor Layton and the Miracle Mask, and Professor Layton and the Azran Legacy. And Professor Layton and the Last Specter is an important piece in the pivotal story of the series. It hinges on the gap of kind of carrying over some of the material from like the first 3 games into this game, and then also kind of be like background story. This is what happened beforehand. This is what's going on that you didn't really know about before. And then it also sets up for the next 2 games, which involve the society known as the Azrans. And so it's important. It has all these things hinging on it, and I feel like it doesn't quite do everything justice. There are some things that I really like. It's kind of fun to have be like, oh, this is how Professor Layton and Luke met, and you can be like, oh, okay, this was like their first case together, and just kind of like see that come in and stuff, because this is Luke's home turf. This is something that's very important to him. What's going on. And then you also get the introduction of one of the other main characters for the next 2 games, which is a lady called Emmy Altava. And it's kind of interesting playing through this game now that I've played the other 2 games, kind of like seeing their different character arcs and how they grow, and like kind of like I see some of the foreshadowing now that I know what to look for. So that's kind of been fun. But even with the foreshadowing, it just seems like the story is taking too big of leaps with things. Okay, I said this was going to be spoiler-free. This is going to be full of spoilers, so from this point on, guys, we're making a mark. I'm going to start talking about things with no abandon. Or just with abandon. I'm going to start talking about things. But I feel like it doesn't support it strongly enough, mainly through the plot and the storyline of the game. There's just these big jumps of conclusions that aren't quite set up enough with like foreshadowing or kind of like hints beforehand. So like, guys, Lucia, like, who would have thought that there was gonna be a Loch Ness monster floating around? And I kind of get that they need that tie-in to be like, oh, the Azrans, the Golden Gardens is actually the connection here, and kind of like introduce that element, because that's a very important element for the next 2 games. And I get that, but I'm just kind of like there's like 1 or 2 hints, but like for something this big, I feel like as the audience, because it's just kind of like, whoa, there's a sea monster, and I don't really know what to think here. And that's kind of my main issue with it. It's just that one big jump of just like, boom, you're just like lost. I mean, it's cool. You're like, hey, cool sea monster, awesome, sweet. But it would have been nice to kind of get that a little bit earlier on in the game, and then especially be able to kind of build your relationship with her more. Not really relationship, but just kind of like build empathy more for that character, especially since she dies in the end. And playing through, I was just kind of like, oh, Lucia died, and everyone's crying, but I don't really feel like crying because I've known her for like 10 minutes because I sped through the last part of the game. Don't worry about it. Um, the other thing that I feel like they should have introduced a little bit earlier on was, Escalade, and kind of this whole thing with like, there's obviously somebody pulling the strings, but then there's like somebody pulling the strings of the guy pulling the strings, and he's really bad. And admittedly, they do have those few cutscenes of kind of like him in like a darkened room with the candles and his cup of tea, and him just being, ha ha ha, you've underestimated Professor Layton, ha. But like, he kind of jumps in out of the blue. He's like, I'm Escalade, and everyone's like, I don't. You're Deska who? Who is this guy? Never heard of him. Has no precedence of being a bad guy at all. So I guess it's just those two things mainly, but it just kind of comes together to form not quite a complete experience for me. So I think Professor Layton and the Last Specter is definitely one of my least favorites of the series, just for the way that the storyline was written. I did enjoy the game as far as like gameplay and whatnot, but I feel like this story wasn't strongly enough supported, and for it to be a successful mystery with like the audience participating, it's just kind of like when you make those jumps, you're just kind of like, okay, this isn't a B-rated sci-fi film. This is like supposed to be somewhat firmly rooted in reality, except it's not because it's Professor Layton. Anyway, I just need to get that off my chest. So thanks for listening to me rant. I hope you at least enjoyed some aspect of this. Hopefully I didn't like scare you off from Professor Layton. But because they're really good games. And maybe I'll be talking about video games a little bit more in the future. I don't know, there's a couple videos I would be like, hey, if I could figure out how to do this, I'd like to do this, but it's kind of farther down the road than I'm able to think right now. So we will see. But I hope to see you on my next video, which will be coming out and who knows when, because let's just be honest, I post regularly. So there's that.